A millionaire man trades all his money for a promise of love. Years later, he bitterly regrets it. John Carter was famously known as the King of Silicon Valley, but behind that title was a man far more complex than any headline could capture. He grew up in a humble neighborhood in Detroit, the son of working-class parents who worked tirelessly to provide him with a good education. From an early age, John exhibited an exceptional intelligence, but his greatest trait was his determination. He knew the only way out of poverty was through hard work, and that's exactly what he did. At the age of 22, he founded his first startup while still in college, a financial management app that became a global success. That was just the beginning. Over the years, John accumulated wealth, power, and influence. By the time he was 34, he owned a tech conglomerate valued at billions. Yet, despite his success, he had no one to share it with. His life was a cycle of meetings, product launches, and interviews, but within the walls of his luxurious mansion, the silence was deafening. Everything changed one night in Paris, where he was unveiling yet another revolutionary product. Surrounded by executives and celebrities at a lavish gala, John felt oddly out of place. Leaving the party, he wandered the streets of the city. It was then that he saw Isabella Moreau, a street artist, painting along the banks of the Seine. Isabella was unlike anyone John had ever met, vibrant, full of life, and completely indifferent to the world of luxury he came from. Isabella dismissed John's initial attempts to strike up a conversation. "I'm not interested in men who think money can buy everything," she said with a disarming bluntness. John was used to being admired for his wealth, but with Isabella it meant nothing. In that moment, something shifted within him. He felt a need to prove his worth in a different way. With time, John and Isabella began spending more time together. He frequently visited the spot where she painted, bought her artwork, and talked to her about art, something he had never explored before. Isabella challenged him to see the world differently, and John found himself increasingly drawn to her. But there was a problem. Isabella didn't trust wealthy men. She believed money corrupted people and relationships, a distrust that built a wall John didn't know how to break through. "If you really want to know what love is, you need to let go of what's holding you back," Isabella said one night. Her words lingered in John's mind. He realized he was willing to do anything to show her he was more than just his fortune. That's when he made the most radical decision of his life, to give it all up. John's decision was as bold as it was unexpected. He sold his company, donated nearly his entire fortune to charity, and left his mansion behind. With what little was left, he rented a small apartment in Montmartre, the artist district in Paris. When he told Isabella what he had done, she was incredulous. "You really did this? For me?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "I did it for us. I want you to see who I really am, with nothing between us," John replied. Isabella was touched, but also confused. She didn't know whether to admire or fear the intensity of his gesture. In the months that followed, John and Isabella started building a life together. He found work as a barista at a local cafe while she continued to paint. At first, it seemed they had found happiness. They strolled through the streets of Paris, shared simple meals, and laughed over the little things. John felt as if he were truly living for the first time. But what started as a dream soon turned into a challenge. John, a man accustomed to solving complex problems in major corporations, struggled to adapt to the simplicity of his new life. He found it difficult to embrace his new role, while Isabella seemed increasingly distant. Small tensions began to arise. "You didn't have to give up everything for me," she said. "I never asked you to leave your life behind, but I wanted to. I thought it was the right thing to do," John would reply, though deep down he started to question his own decision. Things worsened when John discovered that Isabella was using their story as inspiration for a new series of paintings. The artworks captured the essence of a man who sacrificed everything for love, but also revealed the doubts and insecurities that came with such a sacrifice. John felt betrayed. He had given up everything for Isabella, and now it seemed as though she was turning his pain into art. The breaking point came during an argument when John confronted Isabella. "Are you using our story to promote yourself?" he asked, his voice filled with frustration. I'm trying to make sense of all this in my own way. Do you think this has been easy for me? Isabella replied, visibly shaken. The conflict between them intensified, and the relationship that once felt like a fairy tale began to crumble. One morning, John woke up to find the apartment empty. Isabella had left, leaving behind only a letter. John, you are an incredible person, but I feel I've lost myself trying to adapt to all this. I never wanted you to change for me. I hope you find the happiness you deserve one day. John was devastated. He had sacrificed everything for Isabella, only to be left behind. The pain was unbearable. But the worst part came days later, when he learned that Isabella was showcasing her paintings at a prestigious gallery in Venice. The series, titled The Sacrifice, was being celebrated by critics and sold for exorbitant prices. Furious and feeling betrayed, John decided to confront her. He traveled to Venice and entered the gallery on the opening night of her exhibition. When he found her, he couldn't hide his anger. You used my life as inspiration for your art. Was that your plan all along? He asked. Isabella was visibly shaken but didn't deny it. I never planned this, John, but our story, it changed me. I turned the pain into art because it was the only way I knew how to cope. Her words hit John deeply. He realized that while Isabella had made mistakes, he had too. He had placed the entire weight of his happiness on one person, expecting her to fill the void within him. Back in Paris, John knew he needed to rebuild himself. Using his skills, he began creating something new, a platform connecting emerging artists with sponsors. He discovered he could turn his pain into a greater purpose. Slowly but surely, he began rediscovering who he truly was. Returning to Paris with a broken heart but a renewed determination, John faced the truth he had long avoided. It wasn't just Isabella who needed to change. He had made the mistake of placing his happiness in someone else's hands, a burden no one should bear. The first months were tough. John, once a master at solving complex business challenges, now faced everyday problems that seemed insurmountable. He lived in a modest rented apartment, stripped of luxury and certainty. Lonely nights were haunted by thoughts of Isabella, but instead of succumbing to despair, John used the time to reflect. He started frequenting the cafe where he had briefly worked. Initially, it was just to keep himself busy, but he soon found himself deeply involved in its daily life. Talking with customers, hearing their stories and learning about their struggles gave him a new sense of purpose. It was there that he met Claire, a retired philosophy professor who became a mentor of sorts. You're looking for answers in places you've never been before, John, Claire said one afternoon. But sometimes it's not about finding answers. It's about learning to ask the right questions. Her words stayed with him. John began questioning everything. What was he truly searching for? Why did he feel the need to sacrifice everything for love? Most importantly, who was he when no one else was watching? Over the next year, John poured himself into a new project. He decided to create an organization that helped emerging artists like Isabella find success without facing their challenges alone. Leveraging his connections in the business world, he assembled a small team of volunteers, and the initiative slowly took shape. The journey was far from easy, with moments of doubt and temptation to quit. You have to remember why you started, Claire would remind him. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about reconnecting with what truly matters to you. Her advice helped him push through. He realized that true transformation wasn't just about rebuilding his life, but accepting his imperfections and learning from them. The ultimate test came when John learned Isabella was struggling with her career. After the initial success of The Sacrifice, critics began questioning the authenticity of her art, accusing her of exploiting personal experiences insensitively. Isabella, once so confident and strong, now faced an existential crisis. By coincidence or fate, John and Isabella crossed paths at a charity event in New York. John was there to promote his organization, while Isabella had been invited to speak about art and personal expression. When their eyes met, time seemed to freeze. Both knew they needed to talk, but the weight of their past held them back. Finally, during the event's intermission, Isabella approached him. John, I didn't expect to see you here, but I think we need to talk. The conversation that followed was intense, filled with unspoken emotions. Isabella admitted she had used their story to propel her career and was now paying the price. "I thought I was turning pain into art, but deep down, I think I was running from myself," she said. John didn't hold back either. "I made mistakes too, Isabella. I put all my happiness on you, expecting you to fix something only I could fix. But that doesn't mean what we went through was meaningless." The exchange led to a moment of profound, mutual understanding. Both realized that while they couldn't rewrite the past, there was still room for redemption and forgiveness. However, John made it clear that his life had moved on. "I've found a purpose, Isabella. Something that doesn't depend on you or anyone else. I hope you find what you're looking for too." Their encounter closed a chapter for John. He returned to Paris with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. His organization flourished, becoming a global beacon for artists facing adversity. John used his personal experiences as inspiration to help others overcome their struggles. He also found love again, this time with Maria, a businesswoman who shared his vision for the world. Together, they built a life where both could grow without sacrificing their identities. Meanwhile, Isabella continued her journey, taking a more honest approach to her art. She began creating works that reflected not just her triumphs, but also her regrets and lessons learned. Though they never rekindled their relationship, John and Isabella maintained a mutual respect and, in a way, became distant friends. Years later, at an art exhibition in Paris, John came across a new painting by Isabella, titled "Reflections of a Sacrifice." It depicted a man gazing into a shattered mirror, with fragments reflecting different parts of his face. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself." John smiled at the painting. He knew it wasn't just about him, it was about both of their journeys. The exhibition raised funds for John's organization, a gesture of reconciliation that marked the final chapter of their story. Today, John is remembered not just as a brilliant entrepreneur, but as someone who turned pain into purpose. His story is a powerful reminder that true healing isn't about forgetting the past, but learning to live with it and eventually using it as fuel for something greater.